son like waits. He's playing his game, and he does like this. And I'm like, Henry, go to the bathroom. He's like, I don't have to go. I don't have to go. And he's like, pause the game. Go to the bathroom. And I know exactly where he gets it from. So anyway, hi.
Just a show of hands. Does anyone need me to introduce Kelly Sue Deconnick? Good. Oh, all right. All
We
right.
can do.
I was kidding. Okay. We'll skip to the good stuff.
Okay.
So you started out adapting manga
Yes,
and not translating.
that's correct.
Can you run us through the differences between, or the challenges of adapting something versus translating it?
Okay. So language is not math. There's no one-to-one. So when someone tells you that they've done a literal translation of something, they're lying to you. So anytime you translate something, you are in some manner adapting it, whether you wish to be or not. But my job as the sort of second layer of adaptation on the manga books that I worked on was to try to magically intuit the intent of the original author and try to adapt the language in such a way that you would be involved in the story and not notice that you were reading it in a language other than how it was composed. What I did not do, I distinguish between adaptation and localization. So localization is when, so say that there was a Japanese book that made reference to a Japanese late night television host. A localizer would then change that to, you know, whatever late night host best suited the reference. So Leno or Letterman or whomever. But a straight up adaptation would leave the name and then footnote or something so that you would know, like hopefully in the least disruptive way as possible, like, oh hey, this is that person and here's where you might find out more about them, and keep reading.
Because they wouldn't be watching Leno in Japan necessarily.
Exactly.
So that's
right.
Okay. And you did not do that.
I don't localize.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't. That doesn't work for me. That's not my policy.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you remember the strangest sort of concept you had to sort of intuit?
Sound of wearing hat.
All right.
Yeah. There's a manga readers. Yeah. All right. Some companies will translate the sound effects, some won't. I largely worked for companies who did translate the sound effects, and so the translator would give me the document that had what roughly in Roman letters what the sound was that they were translating, and then they would put in brackets what it referred to, like, you know, it's a bang, it's a gunshot, or ha ha ha, girls laughing, whatever. And there was one that was sound of wearing hat. Which, like, unless it's one of those jester hats with bells on it, like, I don't tend to, my hats don't make noise.
Like
I don't know. And it was like a bowler. I was like, what the heck? Like, what?
Like the sound of like compressed hair.
Yeah. I think I went with like PTU, like I don't know. And really that's cheating, because that's sound of putting hat on, not sound of wearing hat.
All right.
Yeah, I should have just put awesome.
So the program promised that you would describe your breaking into comics.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Is there anybody who is not bored by this question?
We don't have to.
No,
Just,
no,
it's what
okay.
It's
okay. Devin Grayson, I think it's Devin Grayson who came up with this, said that breaking into comics is like breaking into Fort Knox. Every time someone does it, they board it up so that no one can get in that way again. So my story, I don't know. Who's trying to break into comics?
Yeah.
All right.
You guys could work together like a
Yeah,
heist.
it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I started meeting people on message boards. So like the Fort Knox thing, this analogy doesn't work really well anymore because there probably are, and I don't know about them, but they're message board. The internet was a kinder, gentler place when I was a young woman. And do we have children in the room?
Your kids?
Oh, good. Oh, hi, Eliza. I have a mouth like a sailor, but I'm not going to subject Eliza to it, so, okay.
All right.
Yeah, message boards and comment threads are sort of like, the shitholes of the internet right now.
Well, it used to be that like it was all 10 people who had a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there was a certain camaraderie there.
Yeah, Warren Ellis's Delphi forum had huge traffic, but he had he had like this staff of they were all women moderators who he empowered with like Thor's hammer, like anybody displeases you, you may ban them. Period. And there was no appeals process. It was like, you're an asshole, you're out. You know, it was great. I loved it. And a lot of people that you read today came up through that board. Me, Kieran Gillen, Jamie McKelvey, Anthony Johnston, Sam Humphreys, like tons of us were on that board, and that was where we learned about the craft of making comics and the business of making comics, and that's where we made connections, and that's where we started practicing. And I think that the thing I tweeted the other day that like if I had a time machine, I would go back in time to my early 20s and kick my ass. And that is in part because like I thought I was busy. And in part because I thought what I needed was an opportunity. What I needed was practice. And what I get from a lot of people coming up who are trying to make their way is, how do I get Marvel to look at my stuff? Or how do I get DC to look at my stuff? And how do I get my chance? And my first question is usually, have you written a comic? And probably 50 to 60% of the time, the answer is part of one. And like, yeah, I am not gonna hire a plumber to fix my sink who has only washed his hands. Like, the thing you need to do to get your chance is make comics. And the good news is you don't actually need, people think that they need this whole structure in order to make comics. You don't. Even if you don't have an artist to work with, if you want to write, there are lots of exercises. There are lots of exercises that you can do on your own to start building your chops. And I promise you, when you have skills and you get a really good anthology piece out there, like they will find you. You don't have to come knocking. It's gonna happen. So what you wanna do is get your skills up so you're ready when that call comes. Does that make sense? So that's way more interesting than me actually telling you, like, well, first I did this anthology piece and then so and so. And I can tell you that stuff if you want, but it's really boring. What you really wanna know is how you break into comics. Work. That's how you do it, is you work. And I have heard every excuse in the world for why it's really hard to work. Yes, that's why it's called work. It's hard, and probably the hardest part is that any creative endeavor is terrifying, because once the idea comes out of your head and goes onto the page, it inevitably disappoints you. And we're all so afraid of that disappointment because we have our identity wrapped up in that, in this idea that we have these really good ideas and stuff. Well, the ideas are the easy part. The living with the imperfection of the ideas and keep continuing to work on them, that's the really hard part. And that's what separates you from the people who are gonna sit in their house thinking about the comics that they would like to make and the people who actually end up having careers. And I believe in you, all of you. You can do it.
So then, sort of somewhat related to that, are you an outliner, or do you like get in there
No.
and no outlines?
No, I'm unfortunately, weirdly, these big multi-million-dollar companies, they don't let you just go, I got it, you know. So you have to produce some document that says what your ideas are and where you intend to go. But I am super awful at. My husband does this thing where he's like, new notebook page, 1 to 20. This happens on this page. This happens on this page. And then he writes up the comic. I'm making it sound a lot easier than that. He works his ass off. But he has an instinct for understanding the story as a whole and how much will go on a page that I haven't quite mastered yet. Now, he has 5 years of practice on me, and I'm hoping that is the key, and not just that he is better than me, because that would bum me out. But yeah, I mean, I discover a lot about the story in the writing of it, and he has a tendency to be able to. He can plan a lot out, and there's a lot of like, you know, everybody has their day where you're sitting like this, and you're actually working because you're playing it out in your head, and you're kind of listening to the conversations in your head. But he is much better at sitting down and planning out, you know, those 5 issues or that 1 issue in a way that he can stick to than I am. That process sort of mystifies me. But I've taken comfort in the fact that I'm not the only one who's mystified by it. There are people who are actually much more gifted than I am who are also mystified by it, and that like, but like Joe Hill recently was talking about how now, you know, he's not. He works in a different way, but like he writes the whole 6 issues before he turns in issue 1. I'm like, what's that like? Because we're always at Marvel, we're working at this crazy, insane pace where we just don't get to do that. Yeah, so it's a bummer. If you can arrange to be good at outlining, I would recommend it. So.
Good to know. So, let's see. So you've worked on a lot of comics for characters that started out as supporting cast in another book and then moved on to a one-shot or their own series, like Norman Osborn and Rescue and some other ones.
Does Rescue have her own series? Wouldn't that be awesome?
Oh no, I just meant in general. Like you tackled books that were about characters that started out as supporting cast for another book.
I see. I gotcha.
How do you approach writing a character that has a lot of backstory but has never had the spotlight quite like that?
I don't know the same way I approach anything, I guess. I mean, I try to get inside their head and have a take, and I don't treat anybody like a background character. Even the background character. Okay, right. Somebody called me on this recently. We were talking about this, and I was like, you know, nobody is just a waitress. And he was like, well, what about the crowd scenes? I'm like, fuck you. Like, okay, if you nail down somebody in a crowd scene, I will make something up for you on the spot because I don't like being wrong. But like, you know, okay, the extras maybe not, but anybody you're going to the trouble of giving a name, ask yourself what they want in that scene. If you don't know what they want in the scene, figure it out. If their purpose is to lay pipe, which is a phrase that we use to mean if their purpose is to share exposition, if their purpose is to tell another character on page information that they should probably already know, but you, the reader, don't have, the reader's going to be bored. The reader will know that you're doing that. So try to find a way to make me care about them.
All right, that's good. So I went through an AMA you did recently and picked out some questions. You mentioned that you're very fond of self-righteous anger as a character sort of emotion to sort of portray in your writing. Is that?
Oh, no, that was about me personally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Do you have certain sort of emotional like touchstones that you like to go back to, or like sort of themes or tropes or that sort of thing?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think it's much easier for me to look at someone else's work, my friend's work. I can, like Brian Bendis writes a lot about family, or Fraction writes a lot about fathers, or Hickman's work is like epic and plot driven. Like you can see someone else so much more clearly than you can see yourself. Like I often feel like I have a kind of mirror blindness, but I'm also super vain, so I've read enough of my reviews to know what other people pick out. So I read a lot about identity. I know you're gonna all be shocked by this. I read a lot about feminist issues. Female friendships, intergenerational friendships. Okay, this one is like butterflies, literal and figurative, come up in my work a lot. It used to be unconscious, and then somebody pointed it out, and now I do it on purpose, which is like so cheesy, but I don't care. Butterflies, like flight and falling, even previous to Captain Marvel.
Okay. And on that note, you mentioned your sort of one like elevator pitch for Captain Marvel was Carol Danvers as Chuck Yeager.
Yes.
Could you expand on that a little bit, like what that sort of means to you for the character?
Sure. Yeah. When Carol first Carol first appeared in 1967, and she was a security expert, and then in 1968 oh my God, I'm boring myself. I'm sorry. When she finally got her own book in 1977, she was iconoclastic. She was an overtly feminist heroine, okay, in a way that we don't do today. People think my books are heavy-handed. There's she was the female fury, and there was stuff that it was like, Dad, you don't think I have as much value as my brothers. I mean, it was out there. There was a couple of panels later in the Claremont age when she became the editor of Woman magazine, where it is straight up Gloria Steinem fan fiction, like the big glasses and the hair, that is it. But the thing about that was, she was bold and iconoclastic, and she had kind of a swagger to her. As the character evolved over the years, her military history, her time in the military, became the thing that came to the foreground, and job became character, and we started to think of her as a Law and Order character. And the longer that went on, the more difficult it was to cheer for her. So then Civil War comes along, and for very good reason, and I understand absolutely why, looking at the big chessboard, they needed characters to be, the straight up Law and Order characters, the policemen of the Marvel Universe. And she did some incredibly indefensible things. She rounded up and arrested her friends. And then skip to, we're talking about doing a Carol Danvers solo book. And like, how are you gonna cheer for that? So this thing that had happened after Reed's run and before my run, that was really important, and I get it, but it made her a difficult person to carry a book. And so when we were talking about making somebody that we could get that we could kind of, cheer for and be excited about. We started going back to her roots and how we could nudge her back to that iconoclastic place. And I started thinking about her as a pilot, and I grew up on Air Force bases, and my dad is my dad's a pilot, but my dad's like a airplane fanboy, like we went to air shows my whole life, and it was a big bonding thing for my dad and I. And they claim, my dad said that I could identify a plane by the sound of its engine when I was little, which I think is impossible and not true, but I love that he thought that. My dad and I went to go see The Right Stuff together. You guys know that movie? Oh my God, I love that movie so much. And there's the scene where I'm getting chills, where Yeager's walking away from the X crash, and like there's the burning remains in the background, and like he did it, and he looks so cool. Like a human being has never looked so cool on film. And I was like, that is what I want for Carol. Like, when he takes off the thing, like, and it's like she takes off the, and like there's their hair, I'm like, yes.
So
that, please.
So is it like a sort of an aspirational figure as opposed to like, this is a person who's arresting everybody?
Oh yeah, yes, exactly. Like we want her to be. I mean, like, so yes, military law and order, military structure, but also like Pappy Boeington was military. That is a really old reference. No one in here who is younger than me. You got it. Thank you. All right, sweet. Pappy Boeington was military. Hawkeye Pierce was military. Like you can be in the military and make and like have a sense of humor and swagger and like, well, those might be the literal rules, but we could sort of work around this way a little bit, And that's what I wanted. I wanted somebody that we could cheer for, And nobody wants to cheer for the boss or the cop, I mean, I guess you kind of want to cheer for the cop, but only if he's like the cop who makes his own rules,
Okay, so there's sort of two schools of thought. Well, there's a lot of schools of thought, but there's the idea that superheroes are sort of mythology, or that superheroes within their sort of society function as like celebrities, and like if they were real superheroes, they'd be very famous.
Right.
Do you have any feelings about that, one way or the other?
I'm less interested in the celebrity part of it, although that was actually in my dealing with that a little bit, and dealing with like the internet celebrity part of it was in my initial pitch for Avengers Assemble. I never really got to it, but I'm much more interested in them as the equivalent of operatic characters or modern myth. Commedia dell'arte is one of the things I always bring up. I like them as like overblown types that we somehow then they can communicate to us something about humanity that is weirdly more real than strict naturalism.
Okay, and then what are the challenges coming into a book that people have these very strong feelings about, and also other writers and artists have been working on for sometimes 50, 60 years?
I don't worry about it too much, because I think that I have to write the book I would want to read. I'm not blowing off any. Well, I'm blow off some continuity, actually. Frankly, sorry, but my husband has this. In early Iron Fist, there were these people. There were this whole thing with these people that looked like broccoli. We call them the broccoli people, writers, and it was just this whole weird thing. And when he and Brubaker relaunched Iron Fist, they didn't change any of that. They didn't like retcon the broccoli people out. They just never mentioned them. And so some of Carol's past to me is broccoli people. Like, I didn't retcon it out. It's been dealt with, and I'm never mentioning it again. And so I think if you start to think too much about, like, there's 70 years of history here, and I have to, get it all exactly perfect, and I owe a debt to you will strangle yourself. You'll never get a story out. And none of it matters. None of it matters. Like, there's a difference between character and continuity. So, in issue 37.4a, Carol says, "Oh, no thanks, I don't actually like ham sandwiches." And then I didn't read that one or forgot, and I read an issue where she eats a ham sandwich, and I get a letter about it. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, first of all, no prize. She didn't like the ham sandwich, but she just didn't want to say anything and hurt anybody's feelings. But it's like, if you get strapped up in that, you're writing continuity porn. You're not writing stories, right? And so the purpose of story is to try and find a connection. The purpose of story is so that you read something that makes you feel, and this sounds overblown, but I believe it to the core of my being. I believe that you want to read something that makes you feel like you are not alone in this experience of the world. That you are connected in some way to the rest of us. That's what we want from story. That's particularly what we want from this kind of mythological story. And if we start to confuse that with the details of the narrative, we're really missing the point. When DC relaunched the New 52, there were a lot of people that were super pissed off about that. And the thing that you heard a lot was, now, I have all of these long boxes now, and these stories don't matter. I was like, trying really hard to make sense of that. And what I came to was, like, as long as those stories, first of all, when the New 52 came out, your long boxes did not go poof. Like, nobody came to your house and got them, right? And as long as those stories still affect you, as long as the thing about them that made you love them enough to keep them in a shitty little box in your basement, that is still real. That story still, it produced something in you that made you feel a way, that made you want to be something more maybe, or made you think about something. No one can ever take that away from you. No continuity recon changes that, ever. If it came out and you read it and it affected you, it matters and it's real. When we start to, it's like confusing the Coke with the Coke can. If you start obsessing on continuity, you're obsessing on marketing. It's a trick to get you to buy more stuff. Don't worry about that. Worry about the story. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I think I can guess where this was going to go. But for your creator-owned comic, Pretty Deadly, how much of that did you spend on world building versus how much of that came organically through the story?
Yeah. This is the most. My stomach just turned over when it came out. I'm super nervous about this book. I love it. It is the most collaborative thing I've ever worked on. There's stuff that I genuinely don't know whether it was me or it was Emma, and I don't care. We talk about how comics are like words and pictures, and then together they produce this third channel. This book feels like third channel. Like it's me and it's Emma, but it's not. It's us, and we made this thing together. And I had my ideas about what the book was going to be, and she had her ideas about what the book was going to be, and it went this other way entirely, and we fought it as hard as we could, and it was a disaster until finally we were like, okay, fine. It's a talking bone skeleton and telling the story to a butterfly, and there's a dude with a skull for a head. All right, there have been weirder things in comics. We didn't mean to do fantasy. It was supposed to be straight up Western, and now we have every drop of blood that spills into the earth makes its way to a river, and where those rivers meet, there will be born a beast. And like you must slay the beast and bring me its card. Like, what is that? Like, that is not what I meant to write. I meant like doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. That was what I was writing, and then This is different. But then, like, I got at some point I got sad about that. It was like, oh, but I was gonna write this Sergio Leone thing, and it's not a Leone thing, and I love Leone, and I don't know where I went wrong, and And Charlie Houston dug up this Leone quote for me, and he like went to great effort to find it, because it was like only on the back of a box set that he didn't have anymore, so he had to find it on eBay and somebody who had like taken a picture close enough that he could read it. But this Leone quote, he says, and I wish I could remember it exactly, but he basically says, like, the only thing that matters is the world. The only thing that matters is the myth. And if you create a world that feels real, that is something else entirely, then that is then you have made your art, you know. And so I read that and it was like, it was Leone after all, you know.
Well, there's certainly there's a lot of fantasy elements in Leone, just in the sort of larger than life characters, and less so the Rivers of Blood, but you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's like, and we don't have like, you know, dragons or fairies, but we're like that close, you know.
Sounds interesting. Let's do some Q&A, and we probably come up to the microphone there. Points will be awarded for brevity and originality.
All right. Also, I love your sweater.
So it's a good question, I promise.
All right.
So one of the adages that writers and creatives really adhere to is you have to read other people's work to be able to fuel your own. So I wondered what you're reading, what inspires you, what helps you get into that frame of mind to be able to create stuff like Pretty Deadly and our most beloved Captain Marvel.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. My favorite comics writers are Warren Ellis and Matt Fraction. I might be a little biased on that last one. But no, seriously, like, he's really good. I think Matt challenges the form in a way that that I aspire to. He is a much braver writer than I am. All of that kind of pisses me off. But seriously, Sex Criminals is your new favorite comic. The woman's power in this book is in a moment of intimacy. We have children in the room. In a moment of no, it's okay. It's all right.
She has to learn sometime.
Yes. The two children in the room are two friends of mine, so I want them to be here because they're going to make comics one day that I'm going to read, and you are going to read, and they're going to be wonderful. But in a moment of intimacy, this woman's power is that time stops quite literally for her. And Fraction and Chip Zdarsky have figured out a way to communicate time stopping in a static medium. Okay, so still pictures communicating stillness. It's a lot harder than it sounds. In Casanova, he did freeze frames. How do you do freeze frames in a series of freeze frames? But he did it. He absolutely did it. He embraces comics as comics, not as like little movies on paper, which annoys me to no end for some reason.
Well, sometimes people put in like snap cut to something else, and
Yeah.
everything's a snap cut.
Yeah. Yeah, he continues to inspire me for that reason. Captain Marvel, also if you're looking for a book to read that informed Captain Marvel a lot, I would highly recommend Martha Ackman's Mercury 13 book, which is about the women of this program. There was in the Mercury 13 program, they were testing women at the same time that they were searching for the men who would go on to be the Mercury 7, the first astronauts. They had 13 of the finest women pilots in the country tested in secret, and ultimately it was decided that this will get you going. That though they outscored them in like everything but brute strength, I believe, because they did not have jet hours, and because they weren't all engineers, that those two things would be used to disqualify them, except that the only way you could get jet hours was to be in the Air Force, and to be an Air Force pilot, you had to be a dude. But no, they were not being discriminated against for their gender, they just had to have jet hours. And then the other thing was the engineering thing, except that I believe it's Scott Carpenter was not an engineer, so exceptions were made for the dudes, but not for the ladies. Later, there were papers released where the vice president said that basically he thought that if this was a very dangerous duty, and if a man was killed in this endeavor, then he would be a hero. But if a woman was killed, it would shut down the program. So yeah, it got me all kinds of pissed off.
They determined that women were sort of like biologically better suited towards like some of those things.
Yeah, they're higher capacities for heat, cold, loneliness, and pain. So yeah. Wah, wah.
So when you were talking about trying to walk that line for Captain Marvel between that straight and narrow and someone that you can relate to, immediately I thought of another captain that has to walk that line as well, Captain America. And like what? So like, I mean, for him, he's a character that is, very straight and narrow, but in the same time, during Civil War, you talked about characters.
He was on the right side.
Yes, he was on the right side. So I don't know, when you were thinking about her as a character and how you were going to write her, did you look at all to him and maybe his model? I mean, them being so similar with very strong military backgrounds and everything?
I didn't, but when I started writing them together, I realized like how much I love them as a team. And there's this like super corny moment in Enemy Within where she's weak and she's sick and she's going right into the middle of the battle, and he's like, I'm gonna have your partner meet you there, and she's like, my partner? He's like, yeah, I got just the fella in mind, and I was like, oh, you! Like, I love him. And the moment that Mateo did where they're standing back to back, like it chills, Like I love Steve Rogers so much. I have some daddy issues, I think. Just a little, maybe. Yeah, you bet.
Damn it, tall people. So I was wondering, one of my favorite things about Avengers Assemble is the relationship that's built up between Jessica Drew and the Hulk. Especially
Team Sad!
Yes.
Yes!
Especially really early on, because she starts out just completely manipulating him, and then by the end of that, she's like, "Ah, shit, I'm a bad person. I shouldn't be doing this to this guy."
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering how much of that was planned, or was that one of those things that just sort of popped into the story?
That completely came up in the writing. That absolutely came up in the writing. That was not. That was so outside in. Like, I think most of my stuff is usually inside out. That was outside in. That was like, how do I come up with a way to use pheromone powers that isn't super creepy? Like, her powers are what? Like, no. Oh, and I got like letters from dudes who were super pissed off too. They were like, if you did that to a woman, that would be shut up. Shut up. Sorry. But no, here's the thing, guys, and I know you all know this because you're not lazy thinkers. You can't just flip it. When you take someone who is in a position of privilege and power, and you try to. This is why there is a difference between a female stripper and a male stripper. When a male stripper appears in mainstream television or a film, it is almost always in a context of humor. Why is that? It's about where the power and privilege lies. It's about how do you objectify something that is like that man has power and privilege. So when you try to just flip these things and say, well, if you did it the other way around, yes, we're thwarting expectations, and that's what makes it funny. Okay, so and you know she didn't do it to make him do anything horrible. She did it to make him make a sandwich, to make a point, and then she learned her lesson from it. You know, so it was. I love being lectured by dudes about how sexist I am. It's my favorite thing.
And I just want to say really quick, congrats on finally getting to write the Hulk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hey, dude.
Hello. I don't have a question. I have a gift.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's cool. Yep.
You guys,
Points will also be awarded for gifts. If you bring up a gift, that's extra
that
points.
is James, and if any of you have ever filled out a Captain Marvel pre-order form that you got off of Tumblr, James was responsible for that. So thank you, man. Thanks again. Yay.
Hi, I read your issues of Ghost, and I really liked it.
Thank you.
My question is, I wondered what drew you to that character, and are there any plans for any issues to come out in the future? And it's actually a character I'd never read before, and so if there's anything you'd recommend, because I've seen like omnibuses and stuff of it.
Okay. I had only the vaguest knowledge of that character when I was approached to pitch on it. The editor that approached me about that book, Patrick Thorpe, wrote to me on the strength of Osborne, and because Elisa had been a journalist in her previous incarnation, and because he liked the way I wrote Nora Winters, he wanted me to have a go at it. And so I went back and read those omnibus.
Okay.
So that I could put together my take and pitch on the character. There is some really great stuff in there. There's also some stuff that, let's say kindly, is very of its time. Probably my favorite. So on the good side, there's like this really weird stuff where there's this place that she goes to in her head, and it is the. I think they're trying to do a Vertigo book. I think that's what they're trying. I think that's like the gestalt that they're going for. And there's like all of this fantastic, like weird. I don't know. It's like sci-fi fantasy. I don't know what to call it. Like there's just this great weird comic stuff that's in it that I absolutely love, and I absolutely love her fury. The stuff I don't like so much is when they set up situations that are purposefully salacious just so they can wag their fingers at it, you know? Like, yeah, that's like, oh, come on. And then, like, there's this moment where Barbed Wire and Ghost are being pursued. I'm pretty sure, I would have to double check this, but I'm like 99% sure, by like a gang of naked bikers. And they're like, I think they're like naked bikers with chainsaws. So you know, yeah. But at one point, they're on the ground, and the naked bikers with chainsaws are coming for them. Oh no, what are they going to do? And Barbed Wire turns to Elisa and says, okay, just go with me on this. And so, of course, they make out because dudes are rendered dumb by the image of two women making out, and them kissing buys enough time for them to get the chainsaw away from the naked biker or something. I don't know. That was the point at which I like threw it across the room. It was like, I'm so not doing this. But I stuck with it, and there was stuff in there to absolutely love. I mean, and the series went on forever, and they can't all be winners, you know?
Right.
But there is an ongoing coming. I am co-writing it now because my schedule has gotten a little bit nuts. I took on more than I could chew, quite frankly. It happens. but I'm co-writing it with one of my favorite writers, who is Chris Sabella, who also co-wrote with me on Captain Marvel. And Chris, as it happens, is from Chicago and is also a huge horror aficionado. So the book has gotten even more twisted under Chris and I, and my efforts I felt really strongly that I wanted Chicago to be present in the story, and I think that there is some truth to that with Chris on the book that there wasn't with just me. Also, we have Ryan Sook doing the illustration. Do you guys know Ryan's work? Oh, so good. He's so good. So
Thank you.
yeah, you betcha.
Just a word on microphone etiquette. The trick with it is to get up really, really close, like you're about to kiss in a movie. Like, don't actually kiss it, but just get like, yeah, there you go.
Hi. Whoa.
Yep.
You
And
got
don't
it.
step on it either.
No, you could totally step on it. It's kind of cool. It's like a Doors move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Jessica Drew was brought up earlier, and one of my favorite parts of seeing you write Captain Marvel is to kind of go back to that friendship that's come up after the Skrull War. You saw a lot of it. What's your favorite part about writing their weird BFF-ness?
I love them. And I think that this is me doing the math as to whether Marvel is going to actually watch this video. Probably not, right?
We're all friends here.
Yeah, nobody's going to put this on the internet, right? I kind of think of them as Batman and Superman. To me, I have an actress training, and I've just told this story earlier to people who were in the Marvel panel. I apologize, but I have an actress training, so I tend to come to character from not just their dialogue, but from I think about them physically. And to me, Carol lives right here. Carol is chest-driven, and everything about her goes up. Like, her eyes are kind of always towards the sky. There's a line in that Mercury 13 book about it's about this phenomenal woman, Jerry Cobb, and man, Jerry Cobb and Jerry Truehill Sloan will make your jaw drop. These were real women. But she grew up in Oklahoma, and there's the opening paragraph of the second chapter of that book. The prose is so good. She's talking about, I think it says of course she wanted to be a pilot. From everything in that part of the world looks like it's trying to take flight. And she goes on to describe a gum wrapper dropped that was whisked off into the air, and the sign on the side of the road shaking as it tries to leave the earth, and it's yes. And that's Carol. Everything about Carol is trying to leave the earth, And then there's Jess, And Jess leads with her head and her hips, right? And everything about Jess is pissy. And she's not given into it, but she'll never be Carol. She's never going to see the glass half full. But I think that that's what they love about each other, and I think that they lighten each other up too. I was trying to write Bendis's Jess, who was a bit darker, but I never quite got there. She comes out funny from me for some reason, and I talked to him about it once, and he was like, if I was writing her now, I think she'd be funny too. And so I like to chalk that up to the time that has passed between those two. Well, she just lightened up. Some time has passed, and she's gotten okay with it. But
maybe
yeah.
she likes ham now.
Yeah, there you go.
It helps when everyone doesn't think you're a Skrull anymore.
That does. That is very helpful when people are not all trying to murder you. That's good. That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question, if it's a yes or no question.
Oh, we'll be fast. No, we'll be fast.
You can.
Hi.
Avengers 200. I don't have a question. I just want to get your reaction to what happened to Carol in that infamous issue.
Okay, Avengers 200 only continues to come up because people ask me about it. Avengers 200 is broccoli people. Okay, here is a thing I've never said out loud before. Captain Marvel 17 is my answer to Avengers 200. And you can ask me later what I mean by that.
All right. Well, on that ominous note, that's oh.
Lisa, several people asked me about autographs, and there is another speaker coming in right away, but Lisa is going right back to her table, and she will sign for you there. Okay?
Yeah, I'm at, it's either G1 or G2, I'm not sure. One of them is me and one of them is Matt. So if you get close, you can see me, probably. All right? Cool. Thanks for coming, you guys.